When my parents begged me to hide my uniform at my brother's wedding. Then 12 of veterans stood up. I'm Captain Elena Reyes, and I was 31 years old the night my father asked me to leave my uniform in the closet. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Just this once, Lena. Let the wedding be about your brother. I had flown 14 hours to get to that wedding. I had missed 2 of his birthdays for deployments he never asked about. And still, standing in my parents' kitchen, with my garment bag over my shoulder, I almost said yes. Welcome back to the channel. If you've ever been the family member who was tolerated instead of celebrated, this one is for you. Stay until the end, because what happened in that reception hall is something I still think about every single day. Let me take you back to where this really started. Because you need to understand the shape of my family before you understand what broke it open. My name is Elena Reyes. I'm a captain in the United States Army, currently assigned to a logistics command out of Fort Liberty. I grew up in a small town outside Sacramento with my mother, my father, and my younger brother Marcus. Marcus was the golden one. Not because he tried harder, because he wanted things my parents already understood. He wanted a house with a lawn. He wanted a job with a title people recognized at parties. He wanted, eventually, a wedding that looked like a magazine spread. I wanted none of that. Or at least none of it in the order they expected. I enlisted at 19, against my mother's tears, and my father's long, disappointed silences. I went to officer candidate school 4 years later. I was commissioned the same month Marcus got his real estate license, and my mother spent that entire month talking about Marcus's license. That was the pattern. Not cruelty, not really, just a quiet, persistent erasure. When I called home from training, my mother asked when I was going to get serious about my life. When I got promoted to first lieutenant, she asked if that meant I'd finally be closer to home. When I made captain, she didn't ask anything at all. She just said, "That's nice, honey," in the voice she used for things she didn't understand and didn't want to. My father was quieter about it, which somehow made it worse. He never said the military was a mistake. He just never said it was anything at all. I could count on one hand the number of times he'd asked me a direct question about my job. 0, that's the number. 0 times in 12 years. I stopped bringing it up. You learn, eventually, that hope is just a slower kind of pain. So I became the daughter who called on Sundays and talked about the weather. I became the daughter who sent gift cards instead of stories. Because stories invited questions, and questions from my family always seemed to circle back to the same place. When will you stop doing this and come home? Marcus, for his part, wasn't cruel either. He was just incurious in the specific way people are when they've never had to fight for anything. He got engaged to a woman named Bridget Calloway, and the moment her family's name entered our house, everything changed. The Calloways owned 3 car dealerships and a piece of the local country club. My mother said, the Calloways, the way other people say, the Kennedys. The wedding became, in my mother's words, a chance to show people who we really are. I noticed she didn't ask who I was. She had already decided. 2 days before the wedding, I was unpacking my garment bag in my childhood bedroom when my mother knocked and let herself in before I answered. She was holding a dress. Pale gold. Floor, length. The kind of dress that photographs well, and says nothing about the person wearing it. "I thought you could wear this instead," she said, laying it across my bed like it was already decided. I told her I'd planned to wear my dress uniform. Officers wear them to formal events all the time. It's not unusual. It's not showy, it's just true. She wouldn't look at me directly. The Calloways are very traditional people, Lena. I just don't want anything to feel like a statement. Can we not make it a statement, just this once? There it was, not an insult. Worse, a request, gentle and reasonable, sounding, to make myself smaller. I told her I'd think about it. She smiled, relieved, the way people smile when they think they've won something without a fight. Then she left the gold dress on my bed, and went downstairs to argue with the caterer about shrimp. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time. I want to be honest about something. I almost said yes. Not because I was weak, but because saying yes had kept the peace for over a decade. It was a well-worn groove, and grooves are easy to fall back into, even when you know exactly where they lead. That night I did the thing I always do, when I need to remember who I am. I reached into the inner pocket of my uniform jacket, and took out a small brass compass. Not for direction, it doesn't even work anymore. The needles stuck. It belonged to Specialist Amara Okafor, 22 years old, from a town in Georgia I'd never heard of until I served beside her. She used to say it was for luck. She gave it to me the week before a convoy mission that she didn't come back from. I've carried it every day since. 4 years now. It doesn't tell me which way is north. It tells me who I am when I forget. I held it that night and thought, whatever my mother believes this uniform means, it does not mean a costume. It means a road outside Kandahar and a name I say out loud sometimes when no one's listening. It means something that cannot be folded up and put in a closet just to keep a room comfortable. I still hadn't decided by morning. The day before the wedding, my father's sister, my Aunt Rosa, who has never once in my life sided against me, sent me a screenshot with no caption. I opened it standing in my parents' driveway, car keys still in my hand. It was a family group chat. Wedding logistics. Everyone was in it. Everyone except me. My mother had written, "Please make sure nobody brings up the uniform thing to Lena. If she wears it tomorrow, it's going to look strange next to the Callaways. Let's seat her at the back, near the kitchen doors, just to keep things smooth." A cousin had replied with a laughing emoji. Marcus had replied, "Fine. Whatever keeps the peace." My father hadn't replied. But the message showed he'd read it. 2 minutes after it was sent. On the morning before his daughter would walk into his son's wedding. I read it 3 times. I did not cry, and I did not shake. I went very still. The kind of still that isn't calm, it's the pause right before a decision gets made, and can't be unmade. For 12 years I had told myself a story, that my family loved me, but simply didn't understand this part of my life. That story ended in that driveway. They understood exactly what they were choosing. They had simply chosen comfort over me, every single time, and called it keeping the peace. I went back inside. I hung the gold dress in the closet, smoothed it flat, and shut the door on it. A small, private goodbye to the version of myself who might have worn it. Then I laid my dress uniform out on the bed, checked every ribbon, and started planning exactly nothing. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to bring up the group chat. I was simply, finally, going to stop helping them hide me. I skipped the ceremony seat assignment entirely and slipped into a back pew in plain clothes. Because that hour belonged to Marcus and Bridget, not to me. And when Bridget walked down that aisle and Marcus's face cracked open with joy, I cried, real tears, the kind you can't plan. Whatever else was true, I loved my brother. Family is rarely simple math. After the ceremony, while the guests crossed the lawn toward the reception hall, I changed in a side room. Dress blues, every ribbon in its earned place. Amara's compass tucked behind them where it always rides. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see a statement. I saw the truth the uniform can't help but tell. I was almost at the door when my mother found me. Her face went white, then a hard, bright pink. "Lena, we talked about this," she said, voice dropping to that old hiss I remembered from childhood kitchens. "These are not our kind of people tonight. Please. For me." I told her, calmly, that I loved her, and that I was still going to wear my uniform, and that I wasn't going to embarrass anyone. She didn't hear a word of it. "Just once in your life," she said. "Blend in, Mum," I said. "I'm not the one who should be embarrassed here." Then I walked past her into the light. The reception hall was enormous. High windows, string quartet. 200 guests in clusters with champagne. My assigned seat was near the kitchen doors, exactly where the group chat had put me. I could have hugged the wall and slipped there unnoticed. For a few steps, old habit nearly won, and I started to. I'd made it maybe 15 feet along that wall when I felt the room shift. A murmur, a few heads turning. The particular quiet that spreads when something doesn't match the pattern people expected. Near the head table, an older man in a tuxedo set down his glass and rose slowly to his feet. I didn't know his name yet. I'd learn later he was Colonel Everett Hayes, retired. A longtime friend of Bridget's late grandfather, and a guest of the Calloway family. But in that moment all I saw was a stranger locking his eyes on the ribbons across my chest, on one in particular. And straightening the way men only straighten when muscle memory from another life takes over. He said 4 words, pitched to carry across the whole room: Bronze Star, Valor Device. And then he raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. An old man in a tuxedo, honoring a captain he'd never met, because the ribbon on her chest had told him everything he needed to know. I came to attention, and returned it, sharp and clean, the way Amara would have wanted. Then, one by one, chairs began to scrape back. A man near the bar, a woman in an evening gown by the dance floor, a gray-haired guest near the windows. Not the whole room, specific people. Scattered like something that had been quietly planted years ago, and was only now blooming. I counted them afterward because I needed to 12. 12 veterans among the Calloway family's guests, standing, some saluting, some simply at attention, eyes forward. The room went utterly silent, except for the sound of chairs, and the last note of a violin trailing off into nothing. It was Bridget's father, Harold Calloway, who crossed the floor first. He took my hand in both of his. "Captain Reyes," he said, loud enough for the room. "We are honored to have you here." Then, he told the room what I hadn't put together all weekend. What I'd walked past twice without noticing. Once at the rehearsal dinner in front of an old black and white photograph, and once when Bridget had mentioned, almost in passing, that her grandfather had built this whole family around one rule. Harold's father had served 2 tours before coming home to build the Calloway dealerships from nothing. And he'd spent the rest of his life quietly hiring veterans, sponsoring a scholarship fund, and instructing his children never to let a uniform pass unacknowledged in his house. Half the guests standing in that room were there, because the Calloways had spent 3 generations gathering veterans close. The family my mother had spent months trying to impress. The family she'd decided would be humiliated by a uniform. Turned out to be the one family, on Earth, to honor exactly what she'd been so desperate to hide. She had read the room backward. And now the room had read her correctly. My mother tried to recover. She came toward me with her arms out. Voice pitched for the crowd. "We are so proud of her. We've always been so proud of our Lena." I didn't raise my voice. The whole room was already quiet enough that I didn't need to. "You asked me to sit by the kitchen doors," I said. "You called this a statement, and the people you wanted to impress just stood up for the exact thing you were ashamed of." She had no answer. Her eyes went to Harold, to the standing veterans, looking for someone to agree that she'd been right all along. No one did. I turned to Colonel Hayes and the 11 others. And I gave them a small nod, because a soldier doesn't turn a moment like that into a speech. Then, I said the only thing that mattered. I didn't earn this alone. I reached behind my ribbons and took out the compass, held it so the light caught the worn brass. 4 of us were in a convoy that didn't come back the way it left. I did. She didn't. Her name was Amara Okafor. She was 22. She gave me this the week before and told me it was for luck. I still carry it. It isn't really mine. It's hers. The room was silent enough that I could hear my own pulse. I closed my hand around it and put it back over my heart, where it lives. Marcus found me by the windows later, tie loosened, eyes red. I never asked, he said. In 12 years I never once asked you what any of it meant. I'm sorry, Lina. He didn't dress it up, and on his wedding day, that was more than I expected. Ask me tomorrow, I told him. And I meant it. Because for the first time, I believed he actually would. My father found me near the coat check. He was holding a folded, softened letter, the official one the army sends when something like a bronze star with valor happens. He'd kept it in a drawer for 4 years, and never once mentioned it existed. I should have said something, he said. I let your mother decide who you were, and I'm ashamed of that. I didn't tell him it was okay, because it wasn't. I'm glad you finally said it. I told him instead. Gentle and honest can live in the same sentence. My mother tried once more, near the end of the night, to smooth it all over. Let's put this behind us. You made your point. As if the point had been the problem, and not the decade of hiding that came before it. I'm not hiding anymore, I told her. If you want me in your life, it's in the uniform, with my name and my history, same as anyone else. I won't sit by the kitchen doors again. That's the boundary. Take it or don't. She didn't answer. That was its own answer. Harold Calloway invited me to speak at his family's Veterans Scholarship dinner that fall, and I said yes. Bridget started calling just to talk, and meant it. And my mother's careful, curated image of our family, the one she'd spent that whole weekend protecting, never quite recovered. You can't unsee a room like that one. Here's the only lesson I kept from that weekend, and I'll leave you with it. The people worth impressing already understood exactly what that uniform meant. It was only my own family who needed to be ashamed of it. And their shame was never, not for one single day, mine to carry. That's my story. One uniform. 12 strangers who stood up before my own family did. If someone has ever asked you to shrink yourself to keep the peace, let this be your sign to stop. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.